What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero, back with another retro Yu-Gi-Oh format video. And in this video, we're going to be continuing our coverage of Treasure, covering a very interesting card in the format, and that is Banisher of the Light. But before we dive into why this card is so interesting, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please consider subscribing. We're at around 410 subscribers, and I'd really like to reach 500 by the end of the month. That would be a huge milestone for me. So if you're not already subscribed and you enjoy my content, please consider doing so. In addition, if you want to play any of the formats that I cover in these videos for yourself, we do have a Discord server now. Link will be in the description down below. But it is a great place to find games in all these obscure formats, and it's really fun, so definitely check it out if you're interested. And lastly, if you enjoy this video, as always, please do leave a like down below. It helps out the channel a lot. But now that that's out of the way, let's talk about what makes Banisher so interesting. So in Treasure format, there are a lot of monsters that sort of replace themselves upon being sent to the graveyard. Things like Witch of the Black Forest and Sangan are very powerful and at 4 copies. And many decks are also playing a form of elemental recruiter, like Shining Angel in this deck, but Mystic Tomato in most other decks. These monsters make it so that, your opponent will likely have a continual stream of monsters that they can use to attack into your life points with and things like that. And a lot of decks aren't playing potentially too many monsters because of this, because they don't really need to. However, this does mean that if you can stop your opponent from being able to replace their monsters, then their decks become a lot worse and hopefully a lot less consistent. And the one way to really do that in this format is through Banisher of the Light. Now, Banisher of the Light is a 2K defender that basically says any card that's sent to the graveyard is banished instead. So this can put a stop to your opponent's Witches of the Black Forest and Sangans and their recruiters, as well as making things like Magician of Faith a lot harder to pull off, as your opponent's power spells might be banished instead of being sent to the graveyard. So basically, the game plan that we have for this deck is to basically get Banisher of the Light face up on the field in defense position, which is very tough for our opponent to remove, and basically just attack in with our monsters and clear the way to get in consistent damage and potentially win the game through that. Now, Banisher is a little bit fragile, as there are many things that can remove it, things like Fisher and, any of the power spells like Regeki, Darkle, etc. But we're playing a full suite of counter traps to potentially put a stop to those threats. So this deck is kind of like an updated form of Mass Negate from Critter format, and I think it's actually pretty neat. But let's dive into the card by card and explain exactly why each piece is in here. So of course we've got the 3 Banisher. You could maybe cut this down to less than 3, because it can brick in multiple copies. But I think it's good to potentially have it just to set, and you have a 2K defender ready to go. And if your opponent does attack into it, then you're pretty good to go. In addition to the 3 Banisher, we also have 3 Shining Angel, which can fetch out Banisher from the deck. Shining Angel could have been like Mystic Tomato here, but I think that Shining Angel is a little bit better at bringing out Banisher, and also potentially bring out something like White Magical Hat, although this is a lot worse of a target in my opinion to bring out, as it does sort of telegraph to your opponent, we're going to try and discard something from your hand next turn. But it is like one of the only good light targets, so that's why we're including it in the deck. In addition to the Shining Angels, we also have some other recruiters, 2 Witch and 2 Sangan. Yes, these are a lot worse when Banisher's on the field, but hopefully, given that you're the one playing Banisher, you will be able to use your knowledge of when Banisher will actually hit the field to sort of use your Sangans and Witches to their best advantage. Also, if your opponent does have like a board clear to clear the Banisher and your recruiters, then you actually will get searches off of them, as, when Banisher's destroyed, cards actually do go to the graveyard. So if things are destroyed at the same time as Banisher, they will indeed get sent to the graveyard, and Witch and Sangan will trigger their effects. We also have 3 Mechanical Chaser as our main beater of choice. The goal of this deck is kind of to prevent our opponent from fetching out things like Mechanical Chaser and replacing monsters that get destroyed, so we can hopefully be able to attack in with Mechanical Chaser for a couple turns. In addition to help with removal and clearing the way for our Mechanical Chasers, we've got 3 Maneater Bugs. Now, you could definitely swap this out for something else, like maybe a Magician of Faith, which is a super powerful card this format, but I figure since the goal of the deck is trying to get Banisher online, it makes Magician of Faith a little bit worse, so I want to go with the Maneater Bugs here instead. And lastly, we've got a Cannon Soldier, which can be great at dealing that last bit of damage to your opponent. It also pairs very well with things like Change of Heart and Snatch Steal, both of which we are playing. Speaking of Change of Heart and Snatch Steal, let's dive into the spells. We, of course, are playing a lot of limited spells here. We've got Change of Heart Dark Hole, Monster Reborn, Pot of Greed, and Raigeki, the classic Power 5, as well as the Hand Ripped, Confiscation, Forceful Sentry, and Delinquent Duo, all extremely good. We've got the Snatch Steal, as I mentioned before, to get even more aggressive, and we've got 3 Mystical Space Typhoon as our spell and trap removal of choice. You could potentially play something like Heavy or Trunade here, but given that we do have a fair amount of trap cards, we actually don't necessarily want to play the big board clears, as that can play a bit badly with our Solemns and Magic Jammers if we haven't triggered them yet. Speaking of our Solemns and Magic Jammers, we've also got this full suite of counter traps here. Not playing 7 tools because I feel like it doesn't do enough in this format for this deck to really take advantage of. But, you know, that could be an inclusion if you want. It's just we didn't really have the space for it, and I think the Solemns are perfectly fine as substitutes for it. But these are going to be very good at stopping your opponent's big plays. We also have a Mirror Force here. It's very good if you're able to pull it off. Very good at stemming offensive pressure. And we have 3 Trap Holes for even more removal. For the side deck, we have 3 Jirai Gumo if we want to get a bit more aggressive. We have 3 Magician of Faith as a way to cycle back spells. You know, if we side out the Banishers potentially, these can be good to bring in. Or, you know, if we think that certain spells will do better in certain matchups, this can be good to bring in. For instance, if we need to side in more spell and trap removal, Magicians of Faith can be pretty good to bring in to get that spell and trap removal back from the graveyard. And speaking of that spell and trap removal, we've got the 2 Heavies and 3 Trunades in the side. These are for like stallier strategies like Burn and Mill that do rely pretty heavily on their back row. We also have 3 Fisher if we need more monster removal, and 1 Waboku if we need to get a bit more defensive. Now, there are many ways you can sort of build this deck around Banisher, a lot of different directions you can go. This is just the direction that I took, and even going this direction, there is more room for optimization. Like 3 Banisher is probably not optimal. You can probably make do with 2 or maybe even 1. But, you know, this is the deck that I put together, and I think it's pretty decent. So let's see how it does in some games. Okay, we've got a game against Aratos, a very great player in all these old retro formats, a very frequent guest on this channel, always a pleasure to have them on. We are going to try and win the rock, paper, scissors, but unfortunately we fail, so we will be going second here. Let's hope our opponent doesn't open some hand rips first turn. Let's see what happens here. So, this is not the worst hand. We have 2 Sangan to search out potentially Banisher, but also potentially like a Shining Angel or something. But they're just going to T-set and pass, which is perfectly fine by us. We are just going to copy them, setting the Sangan and a Trap Hole. We could set a Solemn Judgment as well, but we don't really want to use up Solemn this early in the game, as dropping down to 4k right away is a pretty bad position to be in. So we want to keep the Solemn in hand to potentially save it for later. They're going to Pot of Greed, which is very nice. So they will get some good card advantage there. Flip up a Mystic Tomato. We will just Trap Hole that, as you know, Mystic Tomato is very annoying to deal with. And they'll bring out a Mechanical Chaser. We will trigger the Sangan, find a Maneater Bug here, as we don't really want to telegraph that we're on this Banisher strategy just yet. And we'll pass back to them. Maneater Bug will be able to deal with the Mechanical Chaser, but we're not actually going to set it. We're going to set the Sangan to get another search, and then we can play the Raigeki the following turn. We're going to set a Mirror Force here as well, because it seems like that set isn't a Mystical Space Typhoon, or else they would have used it earlier. So let's hope that we are correct. They're going to bring out a Sangan, and they're going to attack in here. So we will get a search here. We're actually going to search out a Witch. We definitely could have searched out a Banisher here instead, but we figured that, you know, it was a bit riskier to do so, and without the Solemn, it could majorly backfire on us, so we figured that we'd just go for the Witch and save the Banisher plays for later. They're going to set another pass back to us. We draw Magic Jammer, and that's very nice. We're going to bring out the Witch and just attack over the Sangan, see what they search out here. We're playing a bit conservatively here. They're just going to search out a Sangan, and we're just going to set the Jammer, set the Solemn, and pass back to them. Unfortunately, Witch can't actually search out a Banisher on its own, so we've kind of lost our opportunity to do so here. They're going to attack in with the Mechanical Chaser, and we will actually just Mirror Force this. They will get a search, but we've got the Solemn and the Magic Jammer to protect the Witch. We've got Raigeki, Change of Heart. Like, we've got a ton of stuff here, so we're not too concerned about that. We just care more about chipping into their life points. We draw Mechanical Chaser, and we're just going to try and go for it. They do have a Trap Hole, which, you know, we're honestly fine trading the Trap Hole for the Mechanical Chaser there, and we're going to attack in for 11. They are going to Mystical Space Typhoon our Solemn Judgment in the end phase, and they've got a Mystical Space Typhoon for our other set as well, unfortunately. So we've lost a lot of protection here, although it's unclear whether that actually would have gotten use in protecting the Witch here. But we feel pretty fine overall. They're going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser and reborn back a Sangan here, which is a bit annoying. They're going to attack into Witch, so we will get a search here, and we're going to search out Shining Angel to hopefully fetch out a Banisher later. But it's a bit iffy because them having the Sangan makes it so that they can just attack over the Banisher if we bring it out. So a bit tricky here. We're actually just going to set a Man-Eater bug instead of just setting the Shining Angel. And they're going to bring out a Witch. They've got Recruiter's Galore there. We will just use the Man-Eater to pop the Mechanical Chaser as we don't really want them to get a search. And they're going to attack in for 2100 here. We draw Forceful Sentry, which can make just attacking over one of these guys a lot more palatable, because then we can Forceful whatever they search out. So they are going to search out a Magician of Faith, and we're going to activate a Forceful in main 2. Let's see what they've got. They've got a Mystic Tomato, Waboku, Man-Eater, and Magician of Faith. I think of these, we care the most about the Waboku, maybe, because the Witch can just search out any of the others. It's just a bit iffy here. I think that we do just want to shuffle back the Waboku. But we take the Bug instead, I guess, to make sure that they don't have too good sets here. Because, you know, Waboku's just one turn of fading battle damage. But we want to make sure that we snipe the Magician of Faith with the Raigeki here. And so if we shuffle back the Bug, we can make sure that we hit that. Kind of an iffy play. Maybe I would have shuffled back Waboku at a later time, but unclear. It was a very tough choice there. They're just going to bring out a Mystic Tomato here. That will clear the Shining Angel. And unfortunately, this is probably going to work out better for them than for us, because they've got some higher attack monsters to bring out as their final monster here. And we can't bring out a Banisher because they've got the Witch to back up these attacks. So a bit unfortunate. They are going to bring out the Cannon Soldier, crash in to our Shining Angel one last time. We got to think about exactly what we want to bring out here. We're just going to bring out the White Magical Hat, as, you know, it's less damage for us. But maybe we should have brought out a Banisher, as we do have 2 additional copies of that in the deck. Unclear. They will be able to deal 100 here. We will lose the White Magical Hat. And we draw Banisher, which is very nice. We're just going to set that pass back to them. This will enable us to potentially Raigeki them next turn, which is very nice. They're going to attack into the Banisher, flip that up, and we're feeling pretty good about this. They're going to set one pass back to us, and this is perfect. We could potentially just Mystical Space Typhoon their set now to make sure that it's not like a Solemn or something, and indeed we are going to do that. It is just a Waboku. These will both get banished here. And we can just fire off the Raigeki, clear that Witch, clear that Magician of Faith, set the Change of Heart here, and pass back to them. It's unlikely that they have Spell and Trap removal, so we can feel relatively safe setting this, and if they draw Duo, we don't want to lose our entire hand here. That new set is very likely the Waboku from earlier, but we might as well get aggressive here, reborning the White Magical Hat, banishing the Reborn, and attacking in to try and discard a card. It is indeed the Waboku, so that will protect them for a turn. And they have Snatch Steal, which is very worrying. They have Fissure as well, so they will be able to clear the Banisher, and they'll be able to get in for 1,000, discarding our Man-Eater Bug. We will gain back that 1,000, but it is kind of worrying here. We're going to bring out the Mechanical Chaser. That's fine by them. Attack in for 850, and that will go through, so we feel pretty fine about that. We could have Change of Hearted the White Magical Hat there to potentially discard a card from their hand and get in a bit more damage. But I think we're saving the Change of Heart for if they set something like a Magician of Faith or a Bug. We get a bit more value off of that, I think. They're just going to set another pass back to us. We draw Solemn, which is pretty nice. We're going to attack indirectly with the Mechanical Chaser, deal another 1850. Main 2, set the Solemn, pass back to them. They're just going to set one pass back to us, and we draw another Banisher, which is pretty nice. We're going to try Change of Hearting here. They're going to activate Solemn. We're going to activate Solemn. And that will just be the end of the game. So we actually were able to pull that one out. So, you know, Banisher didn't show itself too much that game, but it did come in really handy, just clearing that Witch earlier and preventing them from getting a search. And who knows how that impacted the game as a whole. So going into game 2, we did see that they were on some Solemns of their own. So that might mean that we should side in more Spell and Trap removal. Unclear. I think that we largely keep the deck as is, because I feel like we're pretty well matched up against this deck. Even if they've got Solemns for some of our counter traps, we do have more counter traps than they do overall, I think. So I think we're pretty fine with this. They're going to start with a Pot of Greed here and a Forceful Sentry. So they're going to get some pretty good advantage here and get to see our hand. They're going to send back the Dark Hole, which makes sense. It's a mass board clear, so very good to send back. They're going to set one, pass back to us, and we've got a pretty good hand here. We're just going to set the Banisher, set this Mirror Force here because, you know, they've seen that we've got a Solemn, so we're hoping that, you know, they're not going to waste like an MST on a Solemn. But unfortunately, that Confiscation will reveal that we didn't set the Solemn, so, you know, this could potentially be good MST bait here. They're going to flip up the Witch, activate Raigeki, clearing the Banisher, and attack in for 1100. I think that makes sense. They did know that we had the Banisher set there and they wouldn't be able to get over it. And this way their Witch will get them a search potentially. So we draw Trap Hole, not the best, but not the worst either. We'll set it, pass back to them. They're going to attack in for another 1100. We could have set the White Magical Hat as a defensive option here, but I think we want to save the White Magical Hat to attack their life points with and potentially get a card out of their hand. Cannon Soldier is very nice. We'll set the Cannon Soldier to potentially dodge around Trap Hole. If they bring out something like a Mechanical Chaser, then we can just Mirror Force, but if they don't, then I think we're pretty fine here. They're just going to attack in. They will take 200 off of that main 2. They're going to set 2 and pass back to us. This kind of makes me wish that we had set the Solemn just in case, but you know, what can we do? We're going to bring out the White Magical Hat and try and go for a big play here, just hoping they don't have Mirror Force. And it looks like they might not, but they are going to snipe our Mirror Force at the start of the battle phase and our Trap Hole as well. So that's a bit worrying there. Maybe this does mean that they do indeed have the Mirror Force. Looks like they don't, though, and so we will be able to get in here, attack directly with this White Magical Hat to discard a card from their hand. Unfortunately, they do have Laboku, though, to stop that. We're going to set the Solemn Judgment here and then pass back to them, but I feel like we're in a pretty good position. They've got Mystic Tomato. We are just going to Solemn that as we can get super aggressive here, but unfortunately, they do have a Reborn, and this will really be bad for us because they'll be able to get out another search here and just attack over our White Magical Hat, clearing our entire board. Very unfortunate, but, you know, that's how it goes sometimes. We're going to draw a Mechanical Chaser, which is pretty nice. We're going to set this Shining Angel here just in case they don't have another monster as follow-up, as then we can bring out Banisher and attack over that Witch. But unfortunately they do, and again, we've run into the same problem that we ran into game 1. We can't bring out Banisher here because Witch can attack over it, but they're not going to be able to attack over the Shining Angel with the Witch here because Witch just has too little attack. They've got a Fisher for the Shining Angel, and they'll just pass back to us. We're going to bring out Mechanical Chaser and attack over the Witch. If they choose to get out a beefy monster here, we do have Trap Hole for that. And they're going to bring out a Sandgam, which isn't quite beefy enough to merit the Trap Hole, I think. Although, you know, we won't have any monsters after this, so maybe it would be worth doing. They're just going to attack into our Mechanical Chaser, though, and set one. So it's very likely that's not a Sandgam set and actually a monster that does something. Unfortunately, we just draw a Mystical Space Typhoon, so not much we can do there. They're going to Heavy Storm our set, flip up the Magician of Faith, activate a Monster Reborn here, and that will just be the end of the game. So, game 2 went a bit worse for us there, but to be fair, they drew Pot of Greed, Forceful Sentry, Comfy in the opening couple turns, so maybe we're just destined to lose that game no matter what. But, you know, I think it did sort of show one of the flaws of the deck in that the Shining Angel into Banisher combo is not consistent in the slightest. If your opponent's got a Recruiter out, then they can just attack over the Banisher if you bring it out. So, you know, something to keep in mind when playing this deck in the future is that maybe that combo isn't the best way to go, and maybe we should actually be playing Mystic Tomatoes here instead. Unclear, but we'll just have to see it for game 3. I think we keep the deck the same because, you know, it's just against good stuff, and the deck is already kind of prepared for good stuff as is. Going first here, this is a very, very good hand. We're going to activate Delinquent Duo, get 2 cards out of their hand, and then we'll be able to Forceful after that. So we do snipe a Mystical Space Typhoon. They're going to discard another Mystical Space Typhoon, and then we can Forceful Sentry them, seeing what they've got. They've got a Heavy, Dark Hole, and Cannon Soldier. So of these, I'm not really sure what we're that scared about. They could Heavy the Trap Hole, which would be annoying, but not the end of the world. Dark Hole isn't that big a deal since we just have recruiters in hand. Honestly, Cannon Soldier might be the pick here, as, you know, it's a monster. But even if they summon out Cannon Soldier, we've got Trap Hole for it if they don't heavy it. We've got Shining Angel to crash into it. So honestly, I'm not really sure what to take. We do just take the Dark Hole because this way we can just get as aggressive as we want, basically. And I'm feeling pretty fine about this. We're just going to set this Witch of the Black Forest, set a Trap Hole here, pass back to them. And we could have set a Shining Angel just in case they went for the Cannon Soldier play, but I think it's a lot better doing this, as if they had summoned out a Cannon Soldier, we could then crash into it with Shining Angel on the next turn and bring out like a White Magical Hat. Looks like that didn't happen though. We're going to bring out a Shining Angel here, flip up a Witch. If they drew a Mirror Force off the top, then bravo to them, but we do also get a search here off the Witch with that, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Looks like they drew a Mystic Tomato off the top though, which will stem our aggressive pressure a bit. It does mean that we do know what their set is. It is just a Heavy Storm, so no need to commit more spells and traps to the back row here. They are just going to Heavy Storm our Trap Hole there, bring out a Mechanical Chaser, and attack into our Shining Angel. So this will clear the Angel. We will get out another Angel here. They're going to bring out a Mystic Tomato, and they're going to actually attack into Angel with the Mechanical Chaser. This will prevent us from just being able to bring out more Angels than they can Tomatoes here, which is quite unfortunate. So we will just bring out this other Angel, and, you know, they're just going to crash into that. Probably bring out another Tomato, but we're just going to bring out a White Magical Hat. I think, yeah, we've used up all our Angels. They've used up all their Tomatoes, so they're probably going to bring out like a Recruiter. And indeed they do. They bring out a Witch. So they're just going to attack into the White Magical Hat with the Witch and pass back to us. We got Raigeki, which could be pretty good. We could Raigeki their board away. You know, they'll get a search off the Witch, but we've got Dark Hole in hand as follow-up as well. We could also Dark Hole the board away and get a search here. It would have been great if we had kept White Magical Hat in the deck and instead brought out Banisher to potentially make this play, because we could Dark Hole, search out White Magical Hat, summon White Magical Hat, discard a card from their hand. But honestly, that's not the best, as, you know, they still have a monster in hand that could clear White Magical Hat most likely. So I don't think it's the worst thing that we did this. We are just going to bring out the Sangan though, and Raigeki the board away. They're going to search their deck, thinking about what to get here, and they're just going to get out another Recruiter Witch. But we will be able to get in for 2100 here. And we've got two Recruiters on board, so if they've got a board clear as well, then we're perfectly fine. We'll set the Dark Hole here, as they have gone through a fair amount of spell and trap removal, so I think it's fine setting it. And they're just going to set two, pass back to us. We draw another Sangan, another Recruiter. We could potentially Dark Hole their board in case that's like a Magician of Faith or something, but it's very likely just the Witch, so I don't really think we need to do that. We're just going to switch everything to defense, pass back to them. They're going to bring out a Cannon Soldier, and they're not going to use the effect with priority. They're going to think about what to do here, flip up the Witch, and they're probably just going to go to clear the field, and they are indeed going to do that. They're going to clear the Witch. We'll grab a Mechanical Chaser there, and they're going to clear the Sangan here, and we're just going to grab a Witch. Now we, again, have two Recruiters in hand. Main two, they're just going to pass back to us. We draw a Man-Eater Bug, which is pretty decent, but we're just going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser here, attack over the Cannon Soldier, deal them 450, and pass back to them. We could have Dark Hold here and then gone for more damage, but, you know, I think we're saving the Dark Hole for something better, like if they've got sets that could potentially be like Magicians of Faith and things. I think it's better to save it for situations like that. They're going to set another, switch the Witch to defense, pass back to us, and we draw Mirror Force, which is very nice. We're just going to attack the Mechanical Chaser into that Sangan there, and they get a Giant Soldier of Stone, which is an innovation that Aratos has been pioneering in the Good Stuff deck. It can be very, very strong here. We're going to set a Man-Eater Bug to deal with that stone next turn, or at least hopefully deal with it next turn. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw another Mechanical Chaser, which is pretty nice. We're going to flip up the Man-Eater Bug, target that new set. Unfortunately, is a Sangan, so they did outplay us a little bit here. And we're just going to bring out a Witch here. We can at least get in for 1550 damage. So we will clear the Witch. They will get a Mechanical Chaser with that, and we will be able to attack in for 1550. So that's something at least. Not the best, but they are down to 3,900, which is pretty good. We're just going to pass back to them, as if their set is a heavy, we don't want to play into it by setting the Mirror Force here. And we're not too worried about a major offensive push on their part, as we are at 6,450 life points. They're going to draw 2 off the Pot of Greed, and they're going to think about exactly what to do here. They're going to Mystical Space Typhoon our back row, which is quite unfortunate, as Dark Hole is an incredibly good card. We don't really have much removal here. They're going to Reborn, targeting the Witch, and they're going to bring out a Mechanical Chaser. So they'll attack into our Mechanical Chaser, crashing both, and then they'll attack into the Man-Eater Bug here. So we will take 650. We draw Banisher of the Light, which is very nice, but not really useful right now, as we could summon it, then crash the Witches, but like then we wouldn't get our own search, and they could just summon something to attack over the Banisher next turn. We do have Mirror Force to sort of play around that, so I guess we could have made this play instead, but I think it's just a little bit too risky. We're just going to attack into their Witch with the Mechanical Chaser here. They will get to search out another Mechanical Chaser, but we will get to attack in for 1,100 here. So we'll drop them down to 2050. We'll set the Mirror Force here, pass back to them, and we're feeling pretty good about this. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Mystical Space Typhoon, which we could fire immediately if we're afraid of like a Mirror Force or something. But if they've got a Mirror Force, we still get a search here, so it's not bad. Unfortunately, they do set the Giant Soldier of Stone here. So nothing we can really do to get over that yet. We'll set the Mystical Space Typhoon, switch Witch to defense, pass back to them. They're going to set another. We draw Solemn Judgment, which isn't the best here, but not terrible, I guess. We're going to attack into their new set. It's Man-Eater Bug, so they will be able to pop the Mechanical Chaser there. We're going to set a Sangan here, as if we set the Banisher, they attack into it. Then it flips face up, then they will be able to clear the Witch and deprive us of a search here. So I think we're hoping that they'll use up like a board removal, so that way we get some searches before committing the Banisher to board. Unfortunately, they're just going to set 2 and pass back to us. We draw Mystical Space Typhoon, which isn't quite useful here. We'll just set that, pass back to them. They're going to send another, pass back to us. We draw Pot of Greed, which is pretty decent here. We're going to Pot of Greed for 2, and we draw 2 more Banishers. So we've just got a hand of all Banishers of the Light, which is not really useful on this board. So we're going to pass back to them. And in standby phase, we're actually going to pop 2 of their back row here, just in case they've got Solemns to counter our Solemn, because we have the read that they have a Magician of Faith set. And we think that that's what their newest set is, as they didn't flip up the first one. So we don't want them to be able to counter our activation of Solemn Judgment to prevent them from getting back something like a Heavy Storm or something even more powerful like a Pot of Greed. So we're going to just fire the Mystical Space Typhoons like 2 in a row like that. Maybe this is a little bit greedy, but I think we had to go for it because we just got no like aggressive pressure in our hand whatsoever, and we don't really want them to get major swings in card advantage or tempo. So we're just going to fire those off, and we do hit a Solemn Judgment. So that is very nice. Let's hope that was their only Solemn Judgment. They're going to think a bit here and flip up the Magician of Faith here. We're going to let that go through, as it is a monster face up an attack that we can attack into. We can just Solemn the Heavy Storm instead. They're going to activate Heavy Storm, and we will indeed let that go through. That's interesting. I guess because we were afraid that their last card was a counter trap, and we didn't want to lose too many life points. And we figured that that's their only like Magician of Faith there, so they won't be able to get it back another card. But unfortunately, they do have another Magician of Faith. They will be able to Monster Reborn here. Reborn back a Cannon Soldier there. Summon out a Mechanical Chaser and get in for a ton of damage. They're going to attack into the Witch with the Giant Soldier. And then attack into our set with the Cannon Soldier there. We'll add a Man-Eater Bug to hand. And then they'll attack in with everything else. We actually miss-see the attacks here. We think that the Mechanical Chaser attacked into the Witch. So we miscalculate this amount of damage. It's a little bit more there, 550 more. And so we will just correct that quickly. And they don't have enough to kill us here, but they will have enough to drop us down to very risky territory. So this is a little bit worrying. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. And we could potentially just set like a Banisher here and wall up. However, they haven't used any board removal. Like they haven't used Change of Heart. They haven't used Raigeki. They haven't used Dark Hole. So I think there's a lot of ways that we just lose the game here. So we're going to think about exactly what to do. And we're actually going to use up the Snatch Steel targeting the Cannon Soldier here. We could have targeted the Mechanical Chaser, but if they've got like a Mirror Force set, then we don't want to leave them the opportunity to use Cannon Soldier next turn. So we're just going to take control of the Cannon Soldier, attack in to their Giant Soldier, and then main 2, tribute off the Cannon Soldier, dealing an additional 500. We're then going to set the Man-Eater bug here and pass back to them. This way, if they do have Change of Heart, they can't actually use the Man-Eater bug here, as it will destroy itself on flip summon. And at least this way, we can potentially pop the Mechanical Chaser if that's their only monster left. So let's hope that this is enough here. They are just going to attack in with the Mechanical Chaser. We will be able to pop their Mechanical Chaser. They're going to set one, set another, pass back to us. And we do have a bit of a choice here. We could set the Banisher of the Light to wall up, or we could just try and go aggressive, as we do have just a bunch of monsters in hand. And we just gotta hope that they don't have much aggressive pressure here. We check their graveyard to see what they've got and what they've used up. And I think we could be potentially pretty safe here. They've used up 2 Witches, 2 Sangans. They've used up all the Tomatoes. They've used up 2 Magician of Faith. They haven't used up a lot of Man-Eater bugs, though. So if that is a Man-Eater bug set, then they could just flip that up, popping a Banisher and just getting in for a ton of damage. So there's a bunch of different options to consider here. It's a long choice here, but we're actually just going to set the Man-Eater bug, just in case they do have some aggressive pressure to follow up with here. They are just going to Change of Heart, though, and so, no matter what we had done here, I think we probably would have lost, as, they would have gotten a spell to hand either way, because that is indeed a Magician of Faith, and we would have just lost no matter what, I think. But, that was a pretty intense game 3, and I think, game 1 did show that this deck can win, even though it had a very poor showing in game 2. However, a big problem that emerged to me in playing these games is that I think that this deck is just a little bit too passive, and the combo can be a bit hard to set up. The Shining Angel into Banisher play is really good if it actually goes through, but if your opponent knows that something like that is potentially coming, they can just play around it, not attacking into a lone Shining Angel that you've got, which can make the Banisher play a lot harder to set up. And if you just draw all your Banishers, then, you can't really go aggressive. And I think that that really cost us in game 3 here. So in future iterations of the deck, I might cut down on the Banishers, but I think the main problem with this deck is that it's just a little bit too passive to actually be a tier 1 contender. However, I do think it's a neat anti-meta pick, so it's something to consider and something to tinker with, and I hope to see more experimentation with Banisher of the Light in the future. But what do you think about this deck? Do you think that, I'm overhyping Banisher, that maybe it's not really good enough to see competitive play? Or do you think that the best place for Banisher is just in the good stuff deck? Aratos showed that they're on a Giant Soldier of Stone here. Do you think that that could be replaced with something like Banisher? Because that's also a 2k defender, and it has a bonus effect. Let me know down in the comments below. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.